come to sit on your normal chair in your normal way. And I'm going to keep asking you through the session, well, I'm going to suggest rests in walking, and then when you come back to your chair, I would like to suggest to you that you land on your chair in your normal way. So in a kind of an unconscious way, without adjusting or without trying to sit in any proper way. In the Feldenkrais method, we don't talk about right ways or wrong ways, good ways or bad ways. We open up options. And so coming back to your chair and being a bit unconscious about how you do it and then observing how you landed on your chair could be interesting for you. Okay, so get a sense of how you're sitting on your chair now. You could have your instrument with you if you'd like, but also the sections of the lesson will be without instruments. So I'll leave that up to you to decide what to do. So just see how you're sitting now. When you're standing, you're supported by 2 feet. When you sit, you are supported by 2 feet and 2 sit bones. So see if you can get a sense right now of your 2 feet on the floor. Oh, I forgot to say, it'd be great if you took your shoes off. Be really lovely if you could take your shoes off, be following the lesson in socks or bare feet. That would be really lovely. And then take your attention to how you're sitting on your sit bones on the chair that you're on, and we'll examine sit bones in just a moment. But see if you know where your sit bones are, what they feel like, and how they support you on your chair or your stool or on the floor, because we have some people who I believe are joining us who will be sitting on the floor, which is really fascinating. Some musicians from India who play sitting on the floor. So how your sit bones are supported by the floor in your case over there in India and anywhere else. And taking your attention, you might like to close your eyes so that you can feel these things a little bit more intensely. Taking your attention up from your sit bones and up your spine, see if you can get a sense of how your spine is shaped. Does it feel like it's straight? Does it feel like it's rounded? Does it feel like it's arched? Somewhere in between, some version of those? And how is your head supported on the top? Let's get a sense of that. How are your arms hanging off your shoulders? Okay, and before we actually get into the movements of the lesson, it's worth just talking about the sit bones a little bit. Now, Morella yesterday and Anita the day before were talking about bones and introducing us all to parts of the skeleton. And many of us don't know really very much about our sit bones. So I recommend you choose a hand and choose a sit bone, tip yourself over and feel your sit bone. You choose which side you go. So feel as much of this sit bone as you can through the flesh and the muscles of your buttocks. And I'll describe the sit bone to see if we can clarify that in your image, your internal image of how your sit bone is. So at the back, there's a broader, fatter bit that we often sit on a lot. It feels like it's quite big there, a big knobble at the back. And then from that, going forward, is a bone which is a bit like the rockers on a rocking chair. So it not only is it sort of long and straight, it goes up a little bit and it converges at the pubic bones. So it's wider at the back and it's narrower at the front. Or the sit bones, plural, are wider at the back and narrower at the front. When we slope back, when we sort of lounge back in a comfortable chair, we're sitting right on the back of our sit bones, on a fairly fat bit of the sit bones, but also we're sitting on our tail, on our coccyx, and you might even be sitting on the base of your sacrum. So think of your sit bones like the rockers on a rocking chair, but diverging into the middle. And hopefully that'll be helpful as we go forward in the lesson. Okay. So now you can free your hand up from underneath your buttock. I just wanted to ask, which hand did you try that with? Which sit bone did you examine? And maybe you could think about why you chose that hand, why you chose that side, and you didn't choose the other side. Maybe dominant hand, quite likely, but just have a think about that. And we'll think about choices as we go through. This lesson is all about choices. Okay, now I'd like you to come to the forward edge of your chair. The most forward edge of your chair you can, and still be safely balanced there. And have your thighs sort of parallel forward. So you don't want your thighs to be converging like your sit bones do, and nor do you want your knees to be falling apart and waggling out to the side. So see if you can station your feet in a place where your thighs are parallel, straight forward. And feet under knees, more or less. I say to my cello pupils that it's a great idea in principle if your heels are under your knees, but everybody's different, proportions are different. So you situate your feet where you're comfortable, somewhere under your knees. And now in this position, feel how you're supported on your two sit bones and your 2 feet. So I'll give you a moment to just do that. How is the support proportioned between your sit bones and your 2 feet? So much more on your sit bones, more on your feet, or is it 50-50? Do you take more support under your right sit bone or left sit bone? Do you notice any difference between your feet on the floor? And for those sitting cross-legged or however on the floor, I suppose you'll be feeling taking support under your ankles. This is a surprising addition to my lesson today. So I leave that to you to notice all the places you take support on the floor, perhaps under your knees. Good. And what about your spine now? Now that you're on the forward edge of the chair, you've got your feet out in front and your thighs are parallel. How do you feel your spine is now? How does it compare to the way it was when you first landed on your chair? Okay, now we'll go into some movements to see if we can explore many possibilities of how you can take support from your sit bones and your feet. So could you please hug yourself? I'm going to lower my screen. We don't normally model anything in Feldenkrais classes, but if you are confused about what I'm saying about arms and the arms, you could look at me. And so it's hugging yourself and sort of treating your arms, your one hand on one shoulder blade, the other hand on the other shoulder, more or less. If you've got problems with your shoulders, you've got a frozen shoulder or anything like that, then be very, very careful. Drop things down a little bit lower or approximate somehow or imagine. So this is like a straitjacket for you. Treat it like a straitjacket. And with your spine and your torso acting as one piece, see if you can just tip forward a little bit towards your knees and then go back to where you started, exactly where you started. And we'll call the place you started your neutral or your balance point. So just tipping forward slowly and gently, only as far as is comfortable to go. And notice any pressure change under your sit bones as you do this. Is any pressure change you might be feeling even across your 2 sit bones, or do you feel it more strongly on one or the other? No need to correct anything, by the way. Just accept what you're sensing right now and accept it and become aware of it. No need to correct. Things will probably change as the lesson goes on anyway. So leaning forward, tipping forward, just that little bit, keeping your head stable over your spine, moving as a piece, moving as a piece. And also feel your feet. What part do your feet play in this? Does the pressure change over the soles of your feet as you tip forward and then somehow return to where it was when you come back to neutral or your balanced place? Let your arms down for any time you need to for resting. This might be a good time to uncross your arms and just rest for a moment. And then cross your arms the other way, the non-habitual way, taking hold of your shoulder blades or somewhere like that, making a new straitjacket, but with your arms crossed the other way. This is to shake you up on your habitual habits, which is what we do a lot of in these lessons. And now from your neutral, balanced position, tip yourself as a piece the littlest amount back, the littlest distance back that you feel safe to do, and come and then return yourself to neutral. So it doesn't need to be far. What tells you when you've just gone far enough? That's the right place to stop. Something about when would you fall back? How far do you want to go before you don't like that feeling, I'm going to fall back? So just find the amount of tipping yourself back as a piece that is comfortable to do. Do a couple more repetitions coming back to neutral and then making the next repetition from a fresh place. And notice now what's happening at your hip joints as you do this and the soles of your feet. So cast your awareness lower. Hip joints, sit bones, of course. So how is any pressure changing underneath your sit bones as you tip back and then return to neutral? Any pressure change under your feet, which are under your knees? And then come back to neutral, let your arms go and have a short rest. Then go back to the first crossing of your arms and tip yourself a little bit forward and a little bit back and see if you can match the amount of tipping forward as a piece, keeping your back in one line, as it were, and tipping back, and see if you can go forwards and backwards across your neutral, across your balance. Just the same amount forward and the same amount back. Match them. And as you do this, if you've got the measure of that, then feel what's happening under your sit bones on your chair and anything that might be happening under your feet on the floor or any other place that the floor is supporting you. Good. Bring that to a diminuendo. Just make it smaller and smaller and smaller. We're all musicians. I'm sure we all understand diminuendo, just making it a smaller movement until it becomes almost imaginary. It's almost just a thought rather than a doing. Let your arms down and see how you're balanced over your sit bones and your feet now. How do your sit bones and your feet, how present are they in your experience right now? And rest there for one moment longer. Now, if you listen to the instruction, the next instruction, while you're, as it were, resting. So for anybody who's got shoulder issues, arm issues, this next position might be a bit tricky. There is an alternative, which I will show you. But for those that can, interlace your fingers and put your hands behind your head and bring your elbows forward so that your elbows and your nose point in the same direction. If you can't do that, interlace fingers on the top of your chest, elbows low, will do. That'll do. And what we want to do now is to bring the elbows and the nose down towards the floor between, very small, and take your navel back. and then come back to where you started. So your navel, your tummy button is going backwards while your nose and your elbows are coming forward. Very gently, keep it really small. Ask yourself whether you could reduce it to 50%. And what we're looking for now is not so much that tipping forwards and backwards, it's more about the shape of your spine in space. So as you bring your elbows down and your nose down and your navel back, does your spine reshape itself in space? And what happens under your sit bones? Does the pressure roll to somewhere else on your sit bones? Does anything happen under your feet? Good. Let your arms down, rest your arms for a moment. So see how you feel in sitting now on your chairs. What sense you have of your sit bones. What sense you have of your feet. Whenever you come back to sit down on your chair, notice how you first land on your chair before you come back into this recommended position of being at the forward edge of your chair. And why is that? That's because we want to feel mostly the sit bones and as little as possible of the thigh bones. So that's why it's a good idea to be doing these at the forward edge of the chair. It's not that it's wrong to feel your thigh bones on a chair, but we're examining the sit bones and you want to get the most intense experience of it in this class, in this lesson. Okay, so bring your hands and your arms up into that same position. So interlaced fingers behind your head, elbows forward. Those of you that are not comfortable to do this, you can go for that position that's interlaced on your chest. Elbows forward, nose forward. And this time, as your navel comes forward, elbows and nose up to the ceiling, gently, very gently. It can be the tiniest movement of the navel, your belly pushing forward, and your nose and your elbows going up a little bit towards the ceiling. Keep it really within your own comfort zone. Don't push it. You don't need to go to the end of your range at all. What we're interested in here now is what shape is your spine moving through? And what sensations are you getting from your sit bones as you do this? What sensations from your feet? Okay. Good. Everybody put your arms down, and we'll do one more thing that relates to what we've just been doing, and that's to bring the breath in. So just take a short pause before we get back into that. Actually, it's good if everybody now puts their interlaced fingers on top of their chest, on their breastbone. Works well now. Okay. And you can have your elbows dangling. They don't need to be out to the sides. Now, we'll go between those two movements now. But breathing out as you take your navel back and you look down between your legs and your back may be rounding a little bit. Tipping back on your sit bones, rolling back on your sit bones and breathing out as you do that, breathing in when you come back. And you could encourage with your fingers the breath out and your breastbone to just slide down in the direction of your navel. And if it's pleasurable, let your back round backwards a little bit. Only what's safe, comfortable, pleasurable to do. That's always the case with Feldenkrais lessons. Okay. Then come back to your neutral, your balance, and go in the opposite direction now, still with your hands on your breastbone, breathing in, bring your belly forward and look up a tiny bit. Keep it small. Navel forward, nose up towards the ceiling. Navel forward, breathing in, nose to the ceiling. And feeling how the breath fills your chest into your hands, presses your upper chest into your hands. Then if you're enjoying this, you could take it both ways. So breathing in to go up and bring your belly forward, and breathing out as you round your back and take your navel backwards. Arching with the in-breath and rounding with the out-breath. And then let your hands down. And just see how you're sitting now, what sense of your sit bones you have now, and how you're balanced over your sit bones. How present are your feet in the picture of how you're sitting? Give you a moment to do that. And then I suggest you get up, you take a short walk, 15 seconds, come back without thinking, sit unconsciously back on your chair and see where you land. So just notice when you land back on your chair, what your habitual way of landing on a chair might be, where your feet are. Just looking at your normal pattern for landing on a chair. No correction needed, no adjustment needed, no judgment of how you do it. Just bringing it to your awareness. And then come forward to the forward edge of your chair and have your feet under your knees, more or less, and your thighs straight forward, parallel to each other, not converging, not diverging. All right. And how do you sense your balance over your sit bones now that you're in that position? What does moving you into that position bring to your sense of balance over your sit bones? Okay, use the straitjacket idea again. So take a hug your chest gently, firmly, and you choose now. Press into one of your feet to tip your weight over to one of your sit bones. You choose which foot. If you pressed into your right foot, you'll tip yourself onto your left sit bone. And if you press into your left foot, you'd go over onto your right sit bone. Just notice what you chose first, because that's probably also bound up with habit and pattern. No judgment attached, worth knowing. Okay, now again, we're tipping. So could you now, keeping your straitjacket, press into your, I'm going to use left and right because I'll get in a muddle otherwise. Okay, so could you please press into your right foot and tip yourself as a piece right over onto your left sit bone and then come back to the middle. As a piece. So no bends in the middle, keeping your spine, as it were, straight. I wouldn't like to say like a stick, but trying to hold yourself as a piece, pressing into your right foot, tipping over, letting your head, a bit like one of those toys that sort of tips over, or a pendulum upside down, coming back to the center every time. Back to your two sit bones, pause there for a moment, and then push it to that right foot, tip yourself over your left sit bone, and then come back. And you're back on two sit bones. All right, let your arms down. And compare your two sit bones now. Has your weight shifted at all across those two sit bones? Do you feel more even, less even? And then hug yourself the other way, the non-habitual way. Press into your left foot and tip yourself over your right sit bone. Go just as far as is safe for you, but we're tipping as a piece at this point. One solid piece of torso or trunk. That's it. Head shifting across in space. Good. Good, that's lovely. And then come back to the middle, undo your arms, give them a rest. How are your two sit bones balanced now? Compare your left and your right. If there was any asymmetry before, is it ironed itself out? Or is there a new asymmetry? And then go back to the first way of hugging yourself, straight jacketing yourself. And now tip both ways as a piece. Both ways. Which way did you go first? Interesting to notice what we do first off. And bit by bit, make the movement smaller and smaller. Do a diminuendo in this movement. Feel what's happening between your two sit bones. Do you land more heavily on one and more lightly on the other? And when you go both ways, what are your feet doing to help you? Is it still a bit like cat's paws, pushing one foot, pushing the other? Or are your feet out of the picture, not really participating here? They can, they don't have to, but they might be. Gradually diminuendo until it becomes a movement you're almost doing in your imagination. That's lovely. And then when you've come to what feels like a standstill and you're still playing that in your imagination, think about your head floating above and see if you can just transfer weight from one sit bone to the other without your head tipping left and right. Push one foot, push the other foot, and see if you can just, like a bit like a duck's activity of flippers under the water, or even better, a swan, absolutely gliding above, and all of that activity of the what do you call them, flippers underneath. Can't think of the word. Good. And then come to a full rest. So how do you feel you're balanced over your sit bones now? Are you any further forward, any further backwards on them, on those rockers that we have? And your feet on the floor, are they any different from how they were at the beginning of the lesson? Any more alive, or just the same as they were? Good. One more episode now, doing a weight shifting movement. So if you can, interlace your fingers behind your head and put your elbows out to the side, straight out to the side. If this is not possible for you, interlace on top of your chest and elbows out to the side in that position. It'll work both ways. And this time, thinking about your elbows in space, push into your right foot and slide your elbows straight across horizontal until your head is plumb over your left sit bone. Keeping your elbows, not allowing your elbows to tip. So elbows are traveling sideways and you translate. So we're just going to take our push into the right foot and take our head over our left sit bone. Sort of like sliding it across, not far, just so the head is plumb over the left sit bone. Do that a few times. How are you breathing as you look for this? You halted your breathing, interrupted your breathing. So keeping those elbows level, whichever position you're in, sliding them horizontally. Then come back to the center. You can always put your arms down if they're tired, but come back to this position so that you can do the other side. If you've let your arms down, you might like to just compare your sit bones now. But if you've put your arms back up again, go to the other side. That would be sliding your elbows across, pushing into your left foot and shifting your head tall over your right sit bone. Shifting it tall. So you get long and tall over your right sit bone now. Just a few times, pushing into your left foot and sliding yourself up and onto your right sit bone. And then when you're ready to, go both ways. So rest when you need to with those arms, let them down, come back into the movement. But when you come back, you'll be pressing into your right foot, taking your head tall over your left sit bone, pressing into your left foot and taking your head tall over your right sit bone. So it's not a big movement. You want to feel that you're as tall as you ever can be over each sit bone when you get there. Long and tall through the back. Lovely. Okay. And let that all go. Let your arms down. Pay attention to your sit bones and your feet. Notice any difference in the way you balance over your sit bones and your feet now. Are you any more forward over them? Any more backwards? Bit more to the right, bit more to the left? How do you balance over your sit bones and your feet now? And then I suggest again you take a short walk by way of a rest. See how you feel in walking. Come back to your chair and land without thinking about it. So when you don't think about how you sit, when you don't give the process of sitting any particular attention, why would you normally? Then how do you end up? How's your balance over your sit bones and your feet just when you don't give it any attention? Are you now more back on your sit bones? Is your spine rounded or arched? You more forwards on your sit bones? Are your feet under the chair, in front of the chair, squiggled round the chair legs like I see so many youngsters doing? How are your feet? How did they land? Okay, now come again to the front edge of your chair so that you are fully in touch with your sit bones. And feet under knees, thighs straight ahead as we've been doing all the way through. And just check how it feels to be sitting more consciously on your sit bones and more consciously with your feet in the picture. Check now again. How is that different from the way you were a moment ago? Does it feel better for you, worse for you, more comfortable, less comfortable? Let's take your thoughts around how it's different. And then turn to look over one of your shoulders. You choose. And do this several times and find a marker on the wall where you easily turn to, where your eyes still on the horizon, your eyes could be open for this, and find a marker on the wall where you comfortably can turn to. So no strain, no pushing, just where it's easy to turn to. Find that marker that way. Good, and then come back to the middle. And try and remember that marker, because I will have to instruct the rights and left so I don't get in a muddle. So why did you choose that side? That was the next question I wanted to ask. Why was it that way you chose to turn first? Something about an easier way for you to turn. You might know why, you might not know why, but that would most likely be a habit, a pattern, Not wrong, we're not judging it, but we're becoming aware of our habits. Okay, so now turn to look over the other shoulder and compare it. Why was this your second choice? Do you have some sort of limit there, something that stops you wanting to turn that way so keenly? Maybe you know, maybe you don't know, and it doesn't matter whether you can answer these questions. What matters is drawing your attention to them. Okay, so now let's do some moving over this. So interlace your fingers behind your head again, your hands behind your head, elbows out if you can. Now, could you please press into your left foot and translate yourself sideways, slide yourself sideways onto your right sit bone, as we were doing a few moments ago. If you're happier to have your hands like this as you do it, that's fine too. But we're sliding across and you're getting tall over your right sit bone, pressing into your left foot, tall over your right sit bone, plumb line, head to sit bone. And do that a couple of times just to remind yourself how that was. And then you're looking for a place where you could stay tall over your right sit bone with your left sit bone light or right off the chair. And in that position, slide your left knee forwards and backwards to where it started. Forwards and backwards, straight forward, parallel to the other leg. And just notice, does this invite your top to turn? Do your elbows shift in space? Does it invite the sliding of the left knee forwards and backwards? Does that invite an element of turning through your torso? Then come back, undo your arms, rest your arms, and bring yourself back onto your two sit bones. How are you balanced over two sit bones after you've been balanced on one? Do they have any different presence, your two sit bones in space, in your experience, sorry? And your feet, how are they playing in your sensations of yourself, your experience of yourself? And then simply turn to look over your right shoulder. Don't do anything else except turn to look over your right shoulder, find your marker, and just see whether the marker you can comfortably, without straining, you meet the marker again, or do you go a little further? Just check the marker for yourself. Lovely. Come back onto two sit bones. Just find yourself there. Find your balance over two sit bones. And then bring your arms up again into either that position or this position, and your elbows are out to the sides. And now you're going to press into your right foot and slide yourself up and on top of your left sit bone. So thinking tall, your head comes up and over and is plumb over your left sit bone. Doesn't need to be far. And your elbows are staying out to the side so that you can go straight across rather than tipping. And next time you're in a comfortable place on your left sit bone, stay there, balance there on one sit bone, and slide your right knee forwards and backwards, straight forwards and straight backwards. And just see whether this invites your trunk, your torso, to turn at all. You're balanced over your left sit bone only, and just seeing whether sliding your right knee forwards and backwards invites some sort of a turn. Okay, and then come back onto two sit bones, let your arms down to rest. See how you feel over your two sit bones now. Your 2 feet How do your 2 feet sense the floor now at this stage in the lesson, the part they've been playing? And then simply turn to look over your left shoulder. Did I ask you to find a mark on that wall? I hope I did. I think I may have forgotten to. Sorry.
We chose.
You chose. I hope you chose your mark, and you can now compare how you're turning now round to the left. Is it any easier? Do you go any further? Do you go any further round to the left? And then come back to the centre. And just see how you feel over your sit bones now. How balanced are they, left and right? Are you on the fronts of your sit bones, the backs of your sit bones? How do you know? So let's see with the next series of movements whether we can complete the picture so that you do have a sense that you can know where you are on your sit bones. So for this one, oh, I think you should, have we got time for a walk? Yes, go and have another little walk and then land back on your chair in about 30 seconds in an unconscious way. So return to your chair in the way you would do if you weren't thinking about it at all. Where would you land? How would you land? And when you return to your chair without thinking, without monitoring it or criticizing it or judging it in any way, where on your sit bones have you landed? Where have your feet planted themselves or not? And how is your spine shaped above these sit bones? How is your head supported at the top of your spine? Good. Bring yourself back to the forward edge of your chair, as we have been, and recite your feet to under your knees, heels under knees if that's comfortable, or wherever. Your thighs are parallel and not diverging together, not swinging apart. And having shifted into this position, note any changes of the way you balance over your sit bones and your feet now. What about how the support is distributed between your feet and your sit bones? I asked that question right at the beginning. Is it 50-50, or do you have more weight over your sit bones or more support under your sit bones, less under your feet, or vice versa? One foot more than the other? One sit bone more than the other? How are you relating to your sit bones now and your feet? Okay, now for the final movement to bring it all together. So this position of your interlaced hands, again behind your head and elbows together on either side of your face, your elbows are pointing to the front. If you can't manage that, do the hug again, and I'll explain what you should do. But for those who are able to bring their elbows forward, it's almost like you're making 3 elbows or 3 noses. Think about it like that. Your nose and your elbows are all pointing forwards, and start to make a line up and down as if your elbows and your nose were painting the wall in front of you or the screen in front of you. So straight up and straight down. Feel what's happening through your back and what's happening to your sit bones. Just the little amount that's comfortable for you to do. Now, if you're hugging yourself, you can't do that with your arms. Link your nose to your elbows in this position, as if a stick is linking your nose to your elbows. And then you can do the same thing. You can look up and down with your nose linked by a stick to your 2 elbows out in front. That will give you a similar effect. And as you do this movement, also pay attention to your feet. What's happening there? Good. Release your arms. Rest them for a moment. Then when you're ready, interlace your hands the other way and put them behind your head again. And if you're doing the hug, perhaps you could swap your arms around and hug yourself the other way. And when you're doing the hug, you've got a stick between your nose and your elbows to keep you as a piece. Then in this position, slide yourself. Actually, those with the elbows up could have them out to the side, beg your pardon. Just slide yourself up and over each sit bone in turn. So go that way, reminding you about that, swinging both ways, rather sliding both ways would be a better word. Good. And then bring your elbows together, and your elbows and your nose are all painting circles on the wall or the screen in front of you. So gentle circles, they can be very small. Gentle circles. And if you're doing the hug, just keep your nose and your elbows attached by a stick, and your nose is making gentle circles on the screen or the wall in front of you, as it were, drawing them as if it was a paintbrush or a pencil or something. You're drawing circles. Change direction, go the other way. And now, as you've got the hang of this movement, think about your sit bones. What are your sit bones doing? What are your feet doing? Now, the lovely thing about this method, carry on if you can, or if you want to rest your arms, you can, and then come back into it. But the lovely thing about this is that you can make circles in every direction. You can do all sorts of circles like this. You can do figures of 8. Keep them small, keep them very comfortable and gentle. But all forms of circles, ellipses are available. You can, at this point, you can go play, basically, with what you can do in this sort of position. And in a moment, why don't you drop your arms and see if you can find some of these circles without your arms up. So you could be circling around your sit bones like stirring a pot, or you could be kind of going a little bit more up and down. There's all sorts of directions you can take your circles, as long as you keep them small and safe and comfortable for yourself. Notice what part your feet are playing in making these little circles. And then try one last thing. We musicians might want to explore how we're sitting during a rehearsal. Loads of people around us. We don't want to make it too visible that we're doing these explorations, but we maybe got a little bit of an ache going on in our back. Rehearsals can last forever, bad chairs, all of these things can be going on. So how could we employ these little movements but not let anybody know? Okay, so just float your head above as if you're the swan floating above the water, and see what movement of your pelvis you can find below the swan floating. Keep it tiny, so tiny nobody would notice. Maybe your navel is making circles forwards and backwards, sideways. Can you feel your sit bones changing their pressures on your seat, and perhaps your feet changing their pressures on the floor? So that would be invisible explorations of your sit bones, and also what part your feet can play in that. So finally, just come back to sitting quietly and notice how you're balanced over your sit bones now. Has anything changed in the way you're balancing yourself, in your neutral? Is there a new neutral now from what you were doing right at the beginning? You're more forward over your sit bones, more backwards, more to the right, more to the left than you were if you were inclined one way before. What part do your feet play in this picture of how you're sitting? Are they more alive on the floor? Do they seem to be useful in the process or the challenge of sitting well? And what about your spine now? What sort of shape is your spine? How is it supported over this pelvis with its amazing construction of sit bones and everything else that's down there? And how easy would it be to get up forwards, get up sideways, in any direction now, from the balanced place you are on your sit bones? Moshe Feldenkrais said that if you've only got one way of doing things, then you're stuck. Basically, you're stuck. If you've got two ways of doing things, it's a bit like a light switch. There's an on and there's an off. There's a choice of two, a bit limited. If you've got a choice of three or more ways of doing anything, then you have a freedom to choose from, which is the opposite of being stuck in your habits, stuck in your compulsions, you're stuck in your patterns. And I hope today's lesson will have opened up more possibilities for you, more choices of how you could sit using the support of your sit bones into your sit bones and into your feet. And that's a good place to bring it to a stop.